Good morning to you. It's about 20 to 6 in the morning here in New Jersey. It's the day after Mother's Day. Actually didn't sleep all that well last night, so I'm going to see if I can gut through this and make this entertaining for you, as well as being informative. So, without further ado, let's talk about it, okay? We have here Llana of Gathol. This is the 10th book in the John Carter series that Edgar Rice Burroughs has written. And I've been recording all the ones from, I guess, book 6 through the end of this John Carter Barsoom series for everyone to listen to for free on this same YouTube channel. So, this one originally was published in 1941 in an Amazing Stories magazine. Because back then, that's how they wrote some of this fiction, where they would either put like one piece out there, or they'll serialize it over the course of a few issues. So, this story actually ended up being one that was serialized over 4 issues during 1941. And when Edgar Rice Burroughs has done this, he actually put a part of a story in each, and then the 4 combined become one full story. And they were collected together into an actual book about 7 years later in 1948 or something like that. I'm lucky enough, at least, that the estate of Edgar Rice Burroughs had let the copyrights on these lapse. So all these stories are actually in the public domain. Now, when I first started doing audiobook recording, I actually started working for LibriVox and recording some of the books to be on that website. That is a website that likes to put any book in the public domain as an audiobook out into the world for anyone to listen to for free. So, they actually require the original copyright to be surpassed by, I think, like 94 or 95 years or something like that. So, when it comes to things like the estate letting this lapse, even though it's a 1941 book, on a website like LibriVox won't count it as being available for the public. So I couldn't do this on LibriVox, but I've done it on this channel itself. Interestingly enough, in the same year that he wrote this in 4 issues of Amazing Stories magazine, he had also done the part of the next one, John Carter and the Giant of Mars, earlier that same year. But that didn't see publication in another form for a much longer period of time. So this all circulates. All the 4 stories that happen in Llana of Gathol are about Llana of Gathol. And this actually is... It's very funny, too, because when you read all the stories, she doesn't often go by Llana. They always call her Llana of Gathol. Always, always, always. So, Llana is actually the granddaughter of our main champion, John Carter. So what they have there in this universe, you got John Carter and Deja Thoris. Okay, those are the 2 main couple. And they had 2 children. A boy named Carthoris, which was kind of taking the Carter and the Deja Thoris and putting them together. And another one who was a girl named Tara, who was always called Tara of Helium, just like Llana of Gathol is always called Llana of Gathol. I don't know if Carthoris was ever mentioned as Carthoris of Helium, but I'm sure people who are better scholars of Edgar Rice Burroughs and Barsoom know that better than me. So John Carter and Deja Thoris begat Tara, and Tara married some guy that was like the Genek of Gathol, named Gahan. And they had a child, which was Llana. So that's like the genealogy of the person. So, like other books in the Barsoom series, this all begins with a foreword. And this is where John Carter comes down to Earth and usually regales some relative of his to say, like, hey, I've just come back from an adventure. Let me tell you what happened to me. And it's pretty common in these books for this to happen, where they come down after the fact to tell you the story of what happened before. And then as they narrate the story, whoever they told the story to kind of scribes it down after the fact, almost like the Bible was written after, the events of the Bible, and becomes this book. So that's how they kind of ground it into, why are we even reading this? How do we know about this? Personally, I think it might have been a cool thing if they ever had like an epilogue to these stories that linked in the end of the adventure to the beginning of the storytelling. Just to kind of make like bookends and cap the whole thing. But, as they say, oh well. In this one, they actually break it down into 4 smaller adventures. Each one came out in the magazine at different times throughout 1941. I think the first one came out in March, then June, followed by August, and then October. So I think it was every 2 months or so there was a new installment of this story. And it breaks down like this. There's the Ancient Dead, or what they also call the City of Mummies, the Black Pirates of Barsoom, Escape on Mars, otherwise known as the Yellow Men of Mars, and Invisible Men of Mars. So Llana is the main source of all the stories, from the end of the first book to the end of the 4th book. And we get to hear how she got there, and then in the rescuing and escape, all the things that happened to them along the way. So let me go through the 4 stories real quick, and you'll get a better understanding of what this is, and if you want to read it, or if you don't want to read it, or maybe you've already read it, and it's nice to go through the same world that you once visited. So starting out with the Ancient Dead, or the City of Mummies. This one starts out interesting, because it talks about how John Carter is a loner. Like, he needs his solitude from time to time. And you have to laugh at this a little bit too, because after reading a bunch of these books, he always keeps talking about getting back to his incomparable Dejathorus. And now this one starts of, he just needs to be by himself. He just needs to be alone. He's out there on a one-man flyer, and he's just trekking, But getting beyond that, it starts out with him looking for remote places of Barsoom to just chill out for a while. Now, one of the things is that Mars, or Barsoom as they call it, is littered with these old and ancient dead cities. Okay? And most of them, when they describe them in these books, the architecture is just ornate. And it's completely elaborate. And it's one of those things that the artisans of back then knew how to do this, and they are so long dead, the secrets of actually putting this together this way are lost to the world. Okay, whenever one of these cities come up, they talk about this. Most of these cities, these dead and ancient cities, used to be coastal cities. So what ended up happening was Mars used to be covered with oceans. And there was a very large sea commerce that went back and forth between all the cities. So the city was by like the edge of the water, so to speak, and it had its ports, and the ocean would come right up to it, and the ships would come through, and yada yada. But then, as Mars started to die, the waters started to recede. And then the cities were no longer on the coasts. So what they ended up doing was, after so much receding of the waters, they went out there and built another city further down to be closer to the end of the tide. So all of a sudden, you have one ancient city that kind of like gets abandoned, and everyone goes into the new city. And the waters keep receding. So like city after city after city, and they kind of like waited a while, maybe they thought the waters were to come back. But the cities aren't like really on top of each other like 2 miles away. They waited a while before it was like, wait, we gotta really do this now. moved the city over there, and then found another city. So it goes boom, 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 boom. And it would get erected and have new ports, and then the waters would receive, and yada yada. The cycle just continues. And this is supposed to happen like a million years ago. So the architecture is still there. Now, because Mars is a dying planet, the weather isn't quite like we know the weather here in Earth. So it's not like these cities really eroded, because not only were they well built, but there was nothing to really wear them down over time, except for just being in the sun, you know what I mean? So why even mention that? Well, that's what happens here. So John Carter had heard about some city out and way back over there, probably up north or something like that, and he goes to investigate and just explore the city called Whores. All right. And no, it wasn't an ancient brothel. It's Horz. Whores. So, as he's going over to the city, he starts hearing a sound and looks down and sees this red man running. But he's being chased by these green tharks. And we all know from reading these books what these green tharks are. So, but if you happen to be new to this, the planet does have many different civilizations on it. You know, red men are the usual inhabitants of the planet. There are green men. They're generally considered almost like bad men because they're very vicious. Roving bands of tall, four-armed warriors, and they roam the Dead Seas. And they're just like living off of the green mosses and the ochre-like vegetation of the planet that was kind of left to still grow. So think of like kelp on the bottom of the ocean. That's what's around there. That's how they live, yada yada. And there's also like the black men of Mars, and we'll see them in the second story of Llana of Gathol. There's yellow men, and then yada yada again. There's a bunch of these, and I hope to stop saying yada yada very, very soon. So there's a lot of different races upon the planet, okay? But he sees a red man, he lives and is married to red people, he considers himself a red man himself. So our hero rushes in. And he kills some green men and saves this guy, who he learns later his name is Pandan Chi. Unfortunately, he is one of the secret citizen of Whores. They don't want people to know there's people still living in the city. They generally keep themselves underground. They don't come out too often. But if someone finds out about them, they usually bring them into the city and have them killed because they cannot have their secret get out. So, in a typical John Carter story as well, he gets captured, brought into the city of Whores, goes to court, and they set to execute him. You know, no outsiders. But for some reason, they need to wait for a day. So they lock him and Pandan Chi up in the catacombs, which, you know, it's funny. They say they didn't even know they had. Even though every city has one, they never looked into it. And now they're under the city. And of course, there's rats under the city. So then Edgar Burroughs get to use his new word, ulcio, for rat. And it happens all the time, you know, ulcio this, ulcio that. But there's feral rats down there. There's even a madman down there. They have a little adventure. And it even turns out that this madman is like millions, hundreds of thousands, almost a million years old as well, who had the unique ability to embalm people so well, they practically almost come back to life. Or they can come back to life. And he's been embalming people and putting them in crypts down underneath the city for generations. And he plans to take the two of these that he finds under the catacombs as well, John Carter and Pandan Chi, and embalm them and put them in storage for a later day, yada yada. Oh, again. So, they go through the whole thing. Obviously, they're going to defeat the guy. All of a sudden, the ancient dead rise up, and they talk to each other, and there's a lot of even dead jet acts that are like, I'm in charge. No, I'm in charge. And it's not slapstick funny, but it's amusing to read. But among all the boxes and crypts, they find Llana. And she was actually telling the story where she's fleeing from Gathol. And she was actually trying to leave Gathol to go visit Helium and go visit John Carter and Dejathoris and everyone else we've met along other adventures. But she really wanted to get away from Gathol because a pirate-esque type man named Llana of Gathol had come to Gathol. And they had open arms to welcome him in, white flag of truce and all. But he came in rather aberrant and was kind of a dick. But in the meantime, saw Llana and wanted Llana for one of his wives. So she said no. He didn't like that. He heard that she was going to go leave and visit Helium, so he decides to leave Gathol, but kind of hangs out nearby. And then she comes out, he comes after her, her ship goes down, and she narrowly escapes by running to the city, but she runs into the madman and gets captured as well. Of course, at the end of this, too, Llana of Gathol and his men looking for Llana when she ran away ran into some green people, the Green Men of Mars, the Tharks, and they get attacked, and most of them die. But Llana of Gathol finds John Carter's ship, jumps on it with a couple warriors, leaves the rest behind he couldn't fit, and takes off. So now John Carter's out there, just escaped from a city, has his granddaughter who was now captured as well, but he's got no ship to fly them out with. Oh, and by the way, he now has a new companion with him as well, Pandan Chi. How are they going to get away from there? So they figured, let's start hot-footing it and go in that direction. We'll eventually hit Gathol. Hopefully we'll find, transportation along the way. Okay, so this all happens, and that's the first story. Actually, all of these stories are very interesting, too, because they were all separated into, 13 chapters. Or was it 10? I forget off the top of my head. It was 10 or 13 chapters, and it was a set limit for the magazines. So they all follow the same pattern of what they do. So, that is the Ancient Dead City of Mummies. Now we go to the second issue, The Black Pirates of Barsoom. Okay, and this picks right up where the last one left off. They were hot-footing it for a while. They finally, take a rest and go to continue. But while they're starting to walk towards Gathol to bring Llana back, they, and again, it's all three of them. It's John Carter, Llana, and this Pandan Chi, who was pretty much exiled. He's part of our story now, and he's well in depth. And of course, every woman that they ever talk about in these stories is outrageously gorgeous. Pandan Chi is madly in love with Llana. And he's trying to court her along the way, and she's stringing him along she likes him too, but she never gives him a pause of digging into him and saying, what have you done for me? You haven't proven yourself in battle yet. Who knows what your history is like? I can't make any decision. We'll see what happens. And it's funny, too, because while this is going on, you get a John Carter perspective. God, I just don't understand women. So moving on. Here they are, walking across Mars. They even introduced some vegetation out there called the Mantalia bush. And the Mantalia bush gives you this milk-like sap. And it grows in low moisture. So they're able to wander across the planet, and John Carter will find these, and that'll be their food and sustenance as they move forward. So you can't make things easy for these people. As they're moving along, they happen to find a caravan of Tharks. And Tharks are known for just literally either capturing or killing people. So they're trying to elude and escape them as best they can. And while they're being noticed, they run away and they find this little trail and it leads down into a ravine. So they go down there and escape the Tharks, and the Tharks are riding these big mule type things, and they're not going to go down to chase them I think the trail might have been way too narrow for them to ride down there on something. So they escape down the trail. While they're on the trail, they see skeletons like along the way. It's like, this looks pretty weird. What happened? And they start guessing, like, was there a battle? Was there a disease? Why are these skeletons everywhere? And some look very, very old, and some look relatively fresh. And they get down to the bottom of the trail, and they see that in the ravine, there is a great land there. There's almost forests that must have been hidden from above because it was in almost like a canyon that you'd have to be right over it with a flyer to see down that it's as verdant as it is. So they go down there and hope to get some water to drink, maybe bathe themselves, maybe get some meat or other food to eat. And they also see a city. So it's like, all right, let's see what's down here. And they run into what's called the race of black men. Now, the black men consider themselves the firstborn, and they have a lineage that they can trace back to one of the first races of men upon the planet Barsoom. In fact, it goes to an origin story of the planet where they talk about the original great tree. And the great tree had many branches, and the branches had fruit in these forms of like big nuts, almost like think big chestnuts. And the chestnuts, or the walnut, had 4 chambers in it. And each chamber of this walnut had a different like race in there. One was the black men, one were the great Barbary white apes, one were some plant-like men. I think we actually saw them earlier in a book. And one is like a 16-legged worm. And the origin story is like over time the nuts would fall from the tree, and there was the great oceans back then too, and the oceans might pick up the walnut and bring it somewhere else, where it might go on some other kind of journey, and maybe it would fall down a mountainside and crack open, and then these 4 escaped from the nut and then populated the world. Even the firstborn would go out and find other nuts and open them up to get more firstborn out of there. Now, it turns out that John Carter had actually had interaction with these firstborn back in, I think, the 3rd book. And in that one, he actually befriended a man, and they were trying to, I think they were enslaved or something like that, and they might have tried to lead a revolt against their enslavers, and he pretty much upset the status quo of that whole area and escaped with some, and others just hate them now. Okay? So, as they're down there and notice that, hey, the firstborn are in this city, John Carter's like, I hope they don't recognize me because I'm kind of hated from the other city. Hopefully they don't talk to each other, and it moves on from there. Of course, he gets captured. They all get captured. They get brought inside. They all get hooked up to a machine, which kind of like samples their DNA in a way. And it ends up that this is the reason why there's skeletons on the ridge, on the ravine. I'm sorry, on the trail leaving the ravine up to the ridge. Got it. It's like a death machine. It's a death ray. And it can target you anywhere if it has your genome. So the people that they saw on the trail are ones that tried to escape in the past. And once they were known to be escapees, they just go to the death machine, boom, 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 kill them, move on with life. Hence what they keep talking about. The city's name is Cantal. Nobody escapes from Cantal. Otherwise, it's kind of a typical John Carter adventure. He's a slave in Cantal now. He's been captured, and someone buys him, and the group is separated, and he's got to, he shows his abilities off, how he's one of the best swordsmen of 2 worlds, and he can jump very high because of the gravity on Mars, and he has to now compete in an arena, in the great games, and now because he showed how easily he can kill people with his swordsmanship. So, And this is a common theme also among a lot of these books. But it turns out that this Great Games that's about to happen is a special Great Games. And now other ships are coming in from other cities of the Black Men of the Firstborn. And of course, one of these cities is the one that knows of John Carter and is kind of hunting him. So the heat is on, because if one of these happens to recognize John Carter, he should probably be dead. And of course, to make a story well written, and very good, they do recognize him at an inconvenient moment. So, this moves forward, adventure, adventure, adventure. They pick up another person to their party, a guy named Jad Han. And he came from a city named Amhor. And his beloved's back there, and he can't go back to it. Well, turns out, Amhor was a city that John Carter liberated back in the Swords of Mars. And the beloved this man is talking to is a woman that he had rescued. And she's over in Helium now. So he can reunite this slave with his former beloved. Hey, come with us. Make the party a little bit bigger. Bada boom, bada bing. Machine's destroyed. The four of them take off. There's a lot of killing. There's a lot of escaping. You know, it's another typical Edgar Rice Burroughs adventure story, which you can enjoy and love as much as I did. Now the four of them are in a flyer and they're taking off. And this stumbles upon the third book in this series. This one's called Escape on Mars, or The Yellow Men of Mars. It's pretty exciting so far, right? I thought it was. So now you got the four on this flyer, and they're escaping away, and whoosh, they're going off into the sunset. And hopefully this is it, right? Spoiler alert, no. There's 2 more stories left. So, the plan is, let's get to Gathol, get Llana back to her family, then we'll go to Helium. Okay? But when they get to Gathol, they find out it's under attack. It's being besieged. And not only that, it's being besieged by Gathol, the guy who was trying to get after Llana originally. Now his story is, he's from the far north. And he doesn't have the know-how or even some iron or anything to make weapons, make vehicles, anything to help him out in what he wants to do. So he attacks whatever he can if he thinks he has superior numbers and can take, passers-by. Someone like John Carter going to Whores to begin with, he can just attack him and now he has a flyer. If he sees a small little town, let's go to the town, ransack it, capture all the men, and take whatever we want. Gathol happens to be a very northern city. It's probably one of the premier northern cities around. So his theory is, let me take Gathol. I'll take all their ships and armament, and, wait for it, conquer all of Barsoom. God, that was horrible. Well, he's sitting there in his ship. They see this besiege. Of course, they kind of get shot down, and they get shot down almost near, one of the lines of the besieging, and they're all fine, but in order to escape, they start looking around, foraging for some food, and said, let's get to one of the lines of Gathol, tell them who we are, maybe we can help them out, they can help us out, and move on. But it turns out, as he's on the ground, he gets noticed. And the warriors of Gathol are the ones that find him, and they fight him. They even throw a rope on his ankles and drag him around by one of their little horses, which I forget what they call the horses in this. A thoat. Call it a thoat. They drag him around, whatever. Because it turns out that one of his means of rescue in the last one, to get out from the race of the Firstborn, was John Carter kind of put on some blackface, and he put it all over his body. Well, since they really haven't landed since they left, when he meets these Gatholian warriors, he's still covered in the black soot, in the black makeup, or whatever it is. So they don't believe him saying, like, hey, I'm with you. They're like, dude, this is one of the black pirates. We could do whatever the hell we want with him. So as they're dragging him along the seabeds, whatever else, they find out that it's starting to rub off. Because he's been like going through like this green ochre moss, and as they take him along too. So it's interesting because they didn't believe him, and then they see it wiping off. They're like, shit, maybe he's not one of them. We can help this out. And it's not like, you know, this blackface thing was a new thing they threw in there. He's been painting himself red for adventures all along. So painting himself up to blend in with the enemy he's trying to get through has been commonplace. So even looking back with like a woke viewpoint today to then, which I don't recommend to anybody, is fine because he's been doing it with red paint, with yellow paint. It just happened to be black paint this time. So gets to the Warriors Gathol, tells them what's going on. Hey, I got Llana with me. Let me bring her over here. Of course, when they go back to Llana, you know, the other three were captured by Hinabtol. So now he's got to infiltrate Hinabtol and figure out where his friends are and get everyone out of there. So, as I've been saying, yada yada, adventure, adventure, adventure. He learns some things in his infiltrating. He learns that Hinabtol is from this city called Pancor, way up the north. People talk about being frozen in for 50 years. And most of the men, even who are fighting, don't like Hinabtol. They're just afraid to not help. So, because they think if they're going to get captured by resisting, they might get frozen in again. So it's an interesting little campaign of warfare going on here. But it turns out he's able to steal a warship. He crews it with other people who want to like leave Hinabtol, mostly like mercenaries and assassins. He even gets reconnected with Tanhadron of Hastor. We saw him back in the Fighting Man of Mars. What a small planet is this Barsoom. You know, bombs some other ships on his takeoff, does some interesting maneuvers. Again, great read. Takes off. He decides, listen, gotta find my friends, gotta find Llana. Don't know where they are. Someone said Llana might have been taken up north. I'm piloting the ship out to Pancor, alright? And then go to Pancor, go to Helium, get a fleet, come on back. It's a good plan, right? Well, turns out, when you're with people who don't want to go back to Pancor, and they're all mercenaries or assassins, something might become afoot. And they do. They mutiny, they take over the ship, throw him off the ship with another guy, and leave with Tanhadron as well. So now he's in a cold area. He's with the other guy, but he happens to be near Pancor. So they have a little adventure. They get into Pancor. And again, rewind, he becomes a slave. He ends up having to kill for sport with the guy who bought him. The Jeddak hears of it. He's got to fight in front of the Jeddak because he's now impressed. Of course, the Jeddak is this Hinabtol. And as he goes up there, oh wait, my flyer's here. He must have it as a trophy. I now have a way to escape. And as he fights, oh look, there's Llana. Let's do this whole thing. Bada boom boom. Got some fighting, got some murder, got some adventure. Let's wrap it up in a nice little bow. Take Llana, get the skiff. Poof, you're out of there. You got a book 3 finale. As the wife grinds her coffee beans in the background. Now we're going to wrap this thing up. Okay, we get to the 4th book, The Invisible Men of Mars. You know, that's what they say. But wait, there's more. So now he's in the Arctic, flying on a flyer. No food, no furs, hardly even a way to tell where he's going, so he kind of like points in a general direction. And he's going straight to Helium to get the fleet, to save Gathol, to liberate Pancor. And especially because when he was a slave there, he learned that these people that were frozen in were literally frozen in. Llana of Gathol had been ransacking towns and whatever else, and he's frozen up to like 1 million men in this big frozen north, which he can thaw out whenever he needs more men to go fight somewhere. So if he thaws out all 1 million, he would have enough to put onto ships, take them to like Helium, and win Barsoom. So he has the ability to do this, just not the ships to do it. So it's a race. Can John Carter get to Helium and get the fleet out before Llana of Gathol can take Gathol, get the ships, go get his troops, and then go attack? But first he's got to make it back to Helium. So hungry, thirsty, and cold, they fly over another hidden forest, which they say, all right, let's stop, let's eat and drink and rest, get back in the ship and get out of here. Of course, it can't be that easy. Taken prisoner by an invisible invisible force, including some asshole who's the Jedak's son. The flyer's taken, Llana's taken. They go to a new city that you never heard of before called the Invac. Rinse and repeat. Prisoner, meant to be a slave, meant to be killed in the arena. Meets another person down there he was chained to a tree with from Zidanga, which is a city we learned of in Swords of Mars. But the whole time this happens, he's captured by people he can't see. And even when his flyer was taken, it was taken by an invisible force that overpowered Llana, took the ship, and flew it. And it turns out these people are actually invisible voluntarily. They take a pill every day, and in about an hour they become invisible, and they're invisible for many hours. So they do this because there's other places around here that wants to conquer them as they want to conquer other people, but they never know when attack might come. So they take the pill every day because every day they could be attacked. And if they wait until they're attacked to take the pill, they won't be invisible for an hour. So every day they kind of got used to everyone takes this pill. Now there are some areas, like some common areas or whatever, that they have these weird like lights, and if you're in the light, you're visible. So they can do it back and forth. But the funny thing is too, is when they're invisible to each other. So even when they were walking back to the city after taking John Carter prisoner, he hears them like, watch where you're going. You're stepping on my foot. Get out of here. And all that kind of stuff too. So it's like everyone's invisible to everything. How are you going to be able to actually like attack anybody else and know you're attacking someone else? They even have a small funny little story of the other people, by the way, are also invisible. Them going out and fighting and coming back. And it turns out some of the prisoners they got were their own people. Some of the people they killed were their own people too. So it's just weird. But this story, though, because he's kind of like chained to a tree most of the time, you got a lot of chapters of how do we get out of here, along with like he angers a guard. His name is Modus, who becomes his prime adversary. It does the whole like jumping thing so people can see, oh wow, we have this little pet that can jump very well. Befriends a number of people. There's a guy on the march that befriended him. There's a woman who falls in love with him. So, again, adventure, adventure, adventure. They start to get a plan to get out of there. The woman becomes jealous all of a sudden because he's like, listen, I can't leave without Llana. And she's like, I love you. Who the hell is this Llana? Gets Llana married off practically to this main adversary. Who needs another bride, because that's what they do here. They pick the locks, they go to escape, they're back in an arena, it's hard fought on the way out. It's kind of the end, kind of. They wrap it up again with a little bow. They tie up the relationship thing with this girl not actually loving him. They tie up the siege of Gathol. They liberate Pancor. All the friends are accounted for, and they're all now reunited with their respectives. Okay. Those are the 4 stories. High level summaries. Doesn't really spoil anything for you, but you can go through there at your own pace, or if you want, I'll put the link down below, or I'll link the recording I had done. Now, give me a second. Okay. So, now, I'll have to confess. I actually have 3 of these to do. I got to do this and the 2 next stories. John Carter and the Giant of Mars and the Skeleton Men of Jupiter. So I was able to knock all 3 of these out as far as recordings were concerned in a fast period of time. But after getting through these 4 stories and the next 2 stories, I think I started to feel just a little bit of that John Carter fatigue. You know, and I know, it's like people telling a May the 4th Star Wars fan that you've lost touch with that series. But I realized that this was written in 1941. So there's been a whole ton of content that has come out in the sci-fi genre, which has happened since then, but back then it didn't have to compete with. In fact, I think they say very often that things like John Carter was an impetus for George Lucas's Star Wars movie to begin with. But there's an awful lot of, in these stories, you know, I'm captured or I'm a slave, I gotta fight in the arena. And this stuff all harkens back to the very first book, when he came to Mars originally, was captured by the Tharks. So, and then there's also, like, you know, that word that he came up with, Ulcio, which meant rat. You know, there was Rapace the Ulcio, which is like him saying, I'm Rapace the rat, which, you know, it's kind of hard to put it in our own little gangster terms, like, you know, there's Joey Two Tones or whatever else, but saying my name is Vinny the Rat doesn't sound very something that you want to promote, you know what I mean? But the Ulcio is I'm this. And then it's also used as a curse word, and often. And then here they fight rats, and they fight rats again, another one. It's just Ulcio, Ulcio, Ulcio. So you kind of see like the same themes coming over and over again. So I wanted to get it off my chest for a second. You know, it is still some pretty high adventure, but after a while of just this and only this, it's kind of like, all right, you need more. Here's where they were able to, you know, introduce the granddaughter, Llana, and give her her own 4-story arc. So you pretty much gave her her own series as an introduction and an adventure. How cool, you know? Oh, I will say, like I said, always referred to as Llana of Gathol. You know, except for the dialogue tags, where it says Llana said or Llana gasped, it's always, we gotta save Llana of Gathol. We're not leaving without Llana of Gathol. You know, don't really refer to her as anything else, you know. I don't remember them ever referring her to as Leia of Alderaan in her stories. Again, just that fatigue come around. But am I right? You know? But like always, in this set of stories, we are shown practically brand new areas of Barsoom. You know, you get to explore many cities, many valleys, you get even more history of the planet. So Edgar Rice Burroughs is doing all that world building that people who like fantasy and sci-fi love to see. You know. So, in closing this up, I hope this helps to show you just how much this one adventure truly encompasses. You know, I do recommend pick it up for yourself and take a read. And like most of the books in this series, you really don't need to read the prior ones. Any necessary history is brought up. Or is unnecessary, because it always goes into a new area most of the time. Even the fact in this one where he runs into Tan Hadron, you know with the words, he's a trusted officer. You didn't have to know that he was the hero of a couple books ago. Like I said, I do have this. If you don't want to go read it, I do have this recorded on the channel. I will leave the link below. You can follow it over there and listen to it at your leisure or on your driving or whatever you might need. Again, 4 stories. I do here. 13 chapters in each story, and the total runtime for all 4 is just over 10 and a half hours. Okay? But that being said, I'm actually getting hungry for breakfast right now, and I gotta start work pretty soon, so I hope you like what you hear here, and I hope you like what you see. Okay? I've been very happy to see how this book has been received thus far. I mean, in only 3 weeks of it being published on this channel, it's already become my 7th most watched video or audiobook on the channel. So I'm very humbled by that kind of reception that's been granted to it. Okay? And by the way, there's like 650 things I've dropped down here, including the Federalist Papers, chapters of the Bible, the complete works of the Grimm's fairy tales, and such another. Okay? I have 2 more of these to do. I'm actually trying to finish up my notes in the background that I can read over here as you see my eyes keep wandering. But 2 more John Carters have to get done. John Carter and the Giant of Mars. That story's already been dropped, so I want to do one of the book reviews for that. And then just yesterday, on Mother's Day, I was able to drop down the Skeleton Men of Jupiter. And I'll follow it up with one of these as well. But in the meantime, as I like to say, enjoy, happy reading. And you know what content creators say, I'll put the graphic up here somewhere. You know the routine, but that's for all that. Alright, otherwise, goodbye. Enjoy the rest of your day.